Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight is the young 20-something millennial man himself, Professor Pixel. We're covering the 2014 horror movie, very Carpenter-esque, called It Follows. And Professor Pixel, I have to say, one of the best horror films I've seen in a very long time. I'm going back a good 10 plus years. There's a couple films that stick out, like Upgrade, that I think are sensational, phenomenal. Some that are done well, and Gonzo that I like recently. One that you disagree with me on, I believe, called Malignant. I know
Yes.
that's a very divisive film, but It Follows is a small micro budget film, and it's got some interesting themes to it. And it reminds me exactly of something like what John Carpenter might have done with Halloween. What's your initial take on this horror film?
It Follows is a very interesting film. I like the concepts of it. Going through it, it can get very intense. But my major problem is that the film stops. But we'll discuss that later on.
Yeah, I think for the movie, what it is, I think it's a coming of age movie. I think it has to do with sexuality. And I think it has to do with the responsibility that comes along with it. Some say it's an allusion to sexually transmitted diseases. If you heard the writer director talk about it, he mentioned before about having anxiety and having a dream about being followed, and it's something that's personal to him, even if it was something that came to him in a dream. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it makes something a little bit unique. But since this is this guy's, I think, full feature film, it may be a second one, but his first real one, made on a very small budget with real life normal looking people, I think it works on a lot of levels. One, I agree with you, it gets very intense. What's intense about it? This guy's eye for shooting in this movie works perfectly. There's some incredible 360-degree shots, one single takes, a la John Carpenter. It starts off very disturbing with a young woman that, right, whether you think she's pretty or not, or how great her body looks, it's kind of creepy seeing her feeling like she's scared, running in her negligee that's not super sexy or Victoria's Secret like. We don't know what the hell's going on, but then we cut to a blonde who is getting together with her new boyfriend, and they are playing like a game of like people watching, and he kind of freaks out. Then they get together again, and then they have sex, and then he slips her the Mickey and chloroforms her, takes her to a building, and explains to you, hey, just listen, I don't want to hurt you, but something's going to follow you, and if it kills you, it's going to come to me. So if you see somebody walking to you in a straight line run, and you're like, what? And at first, it seems gimmicky, but the way they set the rules up without necessarily explaining the source of what it is, and the shots and the music and the fact that they have it going, a part of you goes, oh, this is cheesy, but it's shot on location in Detroit. There's definitely Detroit's one of those cities that definitely shows you what's happened in America with urban decay, and it just feels like it's shot in the right place too, with natural lighting and everything else here too, and it just adds so much to it. The synthesizer score is great with it. The friends all try to help out, so we're around characters that we at least understand. I'm not going to say we like them or love them. I don't know that we hate them, but I think some of the actions at the end I wanted to talk about too. But um, I agree with you totally. I think it's a tremendous film. One or two more things I want to bring up, but let me hand it over to you so you can talk about some of the things you may like or dislike.
I agree with what you're saying. They set up the rules very, very quickly. It's going to walk towards you. It doesn't run, but it's not dumb. So make sure that you have a way out always. And this guy, I'm trying to remember his real name, but I just know him as Hugh. Hugh isn't doing it because he holds any malice towards this character. None of these characters are truly bad, but he does a terrible thing to her because he is afraid. He's terrified of what's following him. So he passes it on to a girl he's connected with. And when she doesn't initially believe it, but when it's walking towards her and it gets in the house, it changes its form in multiple ways. I actually want to talk about the monster a little bit.
Sure.
Because it as it would appear, can change its form into pretty much anyone. That's what Hugh says, and he makes a mention that I think it turns into the ones we love to hurt us the most. But some of the interesting forms that it takes leads me to believe that this monster cannot just turn into anybody.
No, it's somebody that you've been with intimately, sexually speaking.
Well,
It's alluded to.
I mean, yes, but no, because at the same time, she has never been with the woman who was urinating herself as she was walking towards her. I think this is kind of victims of the curse that is it.
That's yeah,
Because
that's what I'm saying. The one that she sees is a naked lady that was a victim. So it's not that she is with that person, but the person before her did, I believe,
yeah,
or one of them. But
so
yes, somebody in the line of it was a victim.
yeah, because you can see all kinds of forms. There's this like really tall guy that steps up behind the girl that they try to let into the bedroom,
Hmm.
but then at one point the door is blown in and it looks like a child pretty much.
Yeah,
I would say about 10 tries to climb in. So these are all victims of it. So somebody forcing the curse onto somebody else. And we never see Hugh, for example. We don't see him. But throughout it, you see so many different forms. And most of them are in a state of undress of some sort or another. There's one, I believe, that's like a schoolgirl. She has a backpack
hmm,
during the scene at the school. They never confirm that it's actually it,
right.
but the way it's walking, you're pretty dang sure.
Did you notice the
Um,
old guy standing on the roof when she was pulling away too? The old
yes,
man standing completely nude on the roof. That was weird looking.
I believe, and I was watching with some other people, and somebody said that I think that's her dad. Um,
That's an interesting take.
and yeah, I can't exactly remember. Yeah, no, it says right here takes the appearance of her deceased father. So, is it possible that her father was a victim of it? Is it any sexual deviance? I don't know. Um,
Maybe when
but
he was a kid. Who knows?
it asks the question, and ultimately, we are left with they get to the point where they are trying to defeat it, and it seems like they do. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump to my
Yeah, go ahead.
problem with the movie, because after they defeat it, they get it in the pool, they shoot it, and the blood is filling it up. the the main girl and her friend Paul, uh, they have sex, and that night Paul drives through town. He passes prostitutes, and later we see them walking down the streets, and the only other thing we see is there's a figure walking behind them.
Hmm.
So all throughout this, it gets to the point where okay, we're trying to defeat it, and we ultimately kind of do, but then there's that question, did they? And that's where my problem is, because I can like endings like Halloween where Michael Myers, he's not down there. They shot him multiple times. He
Yeah.
fell down, but he's not there. And that's where it stops. But this movie led us through a good 10 minutes of okay, we're in peaceful time now. Everything's okay. And then just to be left with the question, is that it? Uh,
I'm gonna totally disagree with you about the ending.
okay.
And I'll go back to a couple scenes and then tie it up to what you just mentioned before. I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, but I think it's more about the guilt that goes along with having sex. And when you go back and rewatch it, because it's been a while since I've seen it, and I went and I rewatched it today, and I noticed some things that I didn't remember from before, small subtle things too. So they eventually, she's got a group of friends that are roughly her age, and they're all like, you know, early 20 somethings, right? And they're all going to like community college or whatever. And like I say, everybody looks normal, average people here. They're not hot bodies, they're not ugly fuddy duddies. They just look normal. And I think it adds to a lot. The college rat's nothing fancy. It's kind of grimy. It's whatever. And they actually do track down the guy that she had sex with because he had faked his name and whatever, but they did manage to track him down, and he goes, no, I'm really sorry. And I got to give the actor credit here, because I thought he did a good role, because at first when you have sex and he chloroforms her, your first thought is, oh my god, he's taking advantage of her. Not really, but then he did this horrible thing, and then he's a coward because he did all this stuff, and he goes, I just want you to know what's happening, and I had to pass it on, so I'm not trying to help you. And when they catch up to him, you know, he freaks out because he sees somebody walking in the park. He's like, can y'all see her? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay. So you start to see signs of people and the paranoia that comes with it. And it's neat that you see her starting to go, well, this is going to be my life. And interesting line that he says there too. Well, you know, I passed on to her, and he goes, I'm sorry, but if I was a girl, it'd be easy. All you got to do is just go sleep with somebody else. Because it's true, women can sleep with anybody, and it's not hard for them to go find a partner to have sex with, whether they like the person or not. That's reality. And so, even though this guy was somewhat decent looking in a certain kind of way, I suppose, grungy kind of sort of way, you know, it made sense, you know. And what you also saw too in a group of friends there is that her one friend is wanting to have sex like with the neighbor guy, but then there's also the third wheel guy who's not ugly, but he's got the hots for the main blonde girl, but he's not at the level of the guy she slept with. And so what happens is at the end, when she goes to the hospital and all that, she ends up having sex with this other guy to kind of get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
And then she ends up having sex with the he's not a loser, but he's like the guy who's scared of, because he hasn't had his first sexual experience, and he's awkward. He's not a bad looking guy, but he's nervous about it. He's comforting her. He's playing the beta orbiter or whatever. He's trying to console her. But what I thought was evil about this movie was that the power that sex has over you and the guilt that goes with it, because in some way you're always trying to sell yourself on the other person, and presenting a version of yourself that they may find attractive so you can have sex with them. I'm not saying you're being duplicitous as a human being, but we all put on our airs. We're all trying to act a certain way because we may like somebody or enjoy somebody's company, or maybe we just want to get in their pants. That's reality. And in a lot of the scenes of them sitting around talking and figuring out stuff, I like that they didn't sit around and boo-hoo themselves. They took action and had some agency as a group. I thought that was good. You always saw people in the background like holding hands, kissing at various stages of intimacy, like say first base or second base. And it's not obvious, but it's there in almost every single scene in the background. And like I said, you see the blonde main girl seeing what's going on with everything, and she makes the choice to sleep with, I think, not one but two different guys to make sure she passes on. So at the end, when she sleeps with Virgin Boy, he really does care for her, and she doesn't hate him, but he's not her first choice. But now he's what's left. So it's like this unspoken thing, like, well, we're going to make the best of a bad situation, sort of thing. And then they have relations, and they look so extremely uncomfortable at the very end of the movie when they're walking down the sidewalk, like they know what they've been through together, and that trauma has formed a bond between them, which makes sense. And it says that, you know, sex is so powerful that you might end up in a situation you never thought because of it. And then, yes, you don't know if maybe he slept with a prostitute on his own to get rid of it, because he
That's
he
what I
he
was
didn't
thinking.
trust her. And of course, she seemed like she plotted and schemed that, well, I like this guy and he's the best I can probably have. I'll go ahead and have sex with him though, just to be safe. And then he kind of did it on his own, didn't tell her. So it's like two people that are together that don't want to be together, that have cheated on each other, that really, you know, there's reasons in this movie why they may have done it, and you're not sure. And the way they're holding hands, it's cringeworthy because it doesn't feel real at the end, but yet they're trying to make a go of it. And that's why I think the ending was spectacular. Not them defeating in the pool and all that kind of stuff. Because yeah, I agree with you. That was a little whatever. I don't know, but I don't know how you were going to handle it. But that's what I loved about this movie. It was so cynical there at the end, but so realistic. That's what makes it really great.
I mean, no, I don't disagree with any of those elements. And you know what? I was asking the same question, and it's very before on the beach after she sees Greg die,
Mm-hmm.
and she notices the three guys on a boat out in the water, and she goes ahead and she starts undressing, walking into the water.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if she was going to try to. Uh, I don't like saying this, but
Well, if she was,
offer herself to this
yeah,
group of young men. But clearly she didn't, because it is still following her at the end of the movie. Um, and so we ask the same question of Paul when he passes prostitutes later on. I
right.
mean, it's a way to make sure that you buy yourself some time. Um, but
Yeah.
it's
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
but I don't mind that part of the ending.
Oh, I don't either. I
It's
liked it.
the question. It's being led on, and you like how this movie is shot. I, for one, am kind of I find it kind of droning in a lot of ways. You know, we talk about Twin Peaks a lot, and there's an episode that will be coming out when we talk about a hum in a room. This feels like a lot of humming through the intense moments. That is just a me thing, but I felt when you watch these long shots of things that seem to not really matter, like we get the point. She's driving, left turn, left turn, right turn, and slowly she's calming down, I guess, and that's when she gets to the beach. It doesn't build upon the intensity to me. It's kind of distracting. Um, and so at the end, it feels like we get the hum just to be taken through this hum to the point where we're asking, wait a minute, is that it right there?
Yeah, and different people may have their reasons for a soundtrack being effective. Oh, the music's great, but well, some will say no, the music should support the scenes and not dominate and everything too. And there were times when I think the soundtrack here stood out, not in a bad way or a good way, but just as like I'm noticing the soundtrack more than I am the score. And it was in those transition shots that you're talking about, because there's a lot of them shot at dusk with that natural light, and it's gloomy, and it's Detroit, and it's in the fall, so your lighting quality is going to be natural, but just kind of that dreary dronish look to it that fall has. And to me, I think the synthwave nature of the soundtrack really made it stand out. If it was just a whatever kind of soundtrack, it would not have worked. So I appreciate that, because whenever you add that to it, it makes it. There's just something about the combination of synthwave and this kind of horror. Maybe it's the John Carpenter programming in me, or just growing up with synthwave in the 70s and 80s that makes you go, there's a special place for it. And I think overall the soundtrack is good for it. And I do understand the droning part, because this movie's not fast. It's not an action movie. It's really almost like a thriller in a way, where it's just simply paced. But like In the Mouth of Madness with John Carpenter, that we've briefly touched on here on the Extreme Movie Show, it's it's a less is more approach, certainly in this movie, and that's one of the things I give it high marks for. We didn't need to know where it came from for it to work. We get the message of what it's doing, and what's the whole purpose of having a horror movie? It's not about the horror itself; it's about the effect that it has on the people that we hopefully as viewers are somewhat emotionally interested in, because then it drives home a deeper feeling. We want to see the effect that it has on people, and we saw that here from the transition of virgin boy into possible man to girl that's not a bad girl, but you know she gets involved in something due to sex, and the effect that it has on families too, because all the families we see in here aren't necessarily, they're not bad families, like they're bad people to each other, but they're just kind of ho-hum or even broken because of bad situations that they're in. But it's definitely one of those atmospheric tonal type movies, I think, but I think it's a cut above because of the writing and the layers to it, which a lot of films just are hack and slash. That's why I give it high marks too. Those are my final thoughts. Let me hand it over to you for any final comments.
Overall, this movie is enjoyable. There's a lot of elements to it that are interesting. The monster is interesting, and going through it's cool. I've said my problems with it, and they aren't problems for me to say, "Oh, this ruins the movie." It doesn't ruin the movie. I just wish it had a more definite ending. I think that would be better to me.
You want
Uh,
clarity, not ambiguity, huh?
yeah.
Gotcha. And it's not one of those kind of movies, I think, but there's the rub. So, yeah, and that's the thing with horror. Sometimes the ending leaves you unsatisfied, and I think it's probably the hardest thing to do, really. But I agree. It's a very good film, despite whatever flaws you may think are in there. I think the positive greatly outweigh the negatives in it too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. It Follows from 2014. In my opinion, one of the best horror movies in probably the past 5, 10 years at least, maybe even 15, 20, to be honest with you, at the top of my head. Excellent film. Pixel says it's solid, it's decent, it's good. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Also, check out our Facebook page that we've just recently created, so we have a private community of the Extreme Movie Show members there too. Once we get enough people sign up for it, we'll be in a private group there too. It's just created. We're putting posts and links up there too. I also appreciate you guys getting the word out here as our subscriber count continues to grow. Thanks for Professor Pixel and I being involved here at the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.